The sine and cosine graphs have been drawn as a function in green for the cosine and in blue for the sine. And so these follow what we call a sinusoidal curve. These curves kind of go up and down and then they repeat themselves. This is the same curve, but it's just shifted over a bit. It goes up and down. So one thing when we talk about cosine is the cosine is to do with the x positioning on these units on the circle here. So I've shown along here the green has to do with the horizontal, so the cosine is to do with the horizontal positioning or the x positioning as we go around this circle, and the blue is going to be to do the sine graph, which is to do with the vertical positioning as we go around that circle. Okay, so we're going to get these shapes, so those are one period of those shapes, and as I draw in those coordinates, these coordinates that I've drawn from A to I, we need to draw them in. So I'm going to start with A, and A is going to be that point there on the cosine graph, because at A the x value is equal to 1. So the horizontal positioning is 1, so we're going to put 1 as our output there. And as I go around the circle, okay, as I rotate around the circle from A to E, I'm going to hit 0. That's where my 90 degrees is right there. Okay, so 0 is going to be at that point. That's going to be E. Maybe I should label that E. This is A. And I'm going to go to the next black dot. So this is at the horizontal positioning is at the furthest left, or -1. And that's going to be pi. So that's going to be this point here. Okay, and that's going to be H. And then I is when I'm coming around the circle. And as the angle's changing like this, I'm going to come around to point I. And that's going to be at 0, because the horizontal positioning at I is going to be at 0, and then back to A, and we repeat the process. So there's A as well. So this one is I here. I can draw in the red coordinates, and these are to do with the 30-degree increments. So B is going to be at 30 degrees. So B is going to be right about here. B at 30 degrees. That's going to be at pi over 6. Okay, if I go to the next red coordinate here at G, this is going to be at 150 degrees, or it's going to be the same positioning, but it's going to be from backwards from pi. So this is going to be 5 pi over 6. Okay, so that point is G, this point is B. And then I should put in my C coordinate. Well, actually, I'll do D first. The purple coordinates, okay, these purple coordinates D and F, they're going to be at 2 pi over 3, so pi over 3, so it's going to be right about here. It's going to be in fact, it's going to actually be exactly halfway along the y-axis. So this represents pi over 3. I'm just going to zoom in a bit. And then symmetrically on the other side here, the horizontal positioning is going to be at 2 pi over 3, so it's going to be right about here. Okay, symmetrically the same on the other side, and that's going to be at 2 pi over 3, and so this would represent point D and point F. And then lastly is going to be point C, which is halfway in between B and D. Okay, I've done this in brown, so I'm going to do this in brown here. So in here I'm just going to draw in 4 pi, it's 45 degrees. It's going to be right about there. Okay, so that's going to be my C position here. So then we'll do the same thing when we talk about the sine graph. So that was cosine. So cosine has to do with x. Okay, so I'm just going to box that in green, and that's to do with x. The sine graph is to do with y. Okay, the y positioning. So taking a look at A, the y positioning at A is going to be 0 along the y-axis. So it's going to be right at 0. So that's why we get this point right there. That's going to be A, which is at 0. If I go around to the next black dot, it's going to be at E, and that's going to be straight up. In fact, that's going to be the highest point that we can get to. So that's going to be the highest point up here, and that's going to be 1 up along the y-axis. So that would represent E, and then I keep going around the circle to H, Okay, that's going to be the back down to 0. So that's going to be 0 here for h. Okay, again, I'm talking about the y positioning here, and then going to I, it's going to be the lowest you can possibly get. So it's going to be this point right here, and that's where I is going to reside. Okay, at 3 pi over 2. I'll do the red coordinates next, B and G. So B, I'm going to go about 30 degrees, right about there. And it actually works out to be about halfway along the y-axis. And this is going to be at pi over 6. And symmetrically, it's going to be the same height here as it is here. So it's going to be the exact same height here. It's going to be the same distance from pi, which is 5 pi over 6. Okay, so notice that that position is going to be halfway along here. So then going to the purple positions here, again, the purple positions are symmetrical. Okay, they're going to be at this point here. Okay, that's going to be at pi over 3 or 60 degrees. And that same vertical positioning is going to be found in both of those quadrants. So this was D, and we're going to find the other point F over here. Okay, so that's going to be at 2 pi over 3. That's going to be point F. I've got to draw the red points in there too. So this was B here and G here. Lastly is that brown point. It's going to be halfway in between here, and just draw that in. That's going to be at 45 degrees. So in fact the horizontal position and the vertical position of this coordinate here are actually exactly the same, and that's going to be our 45 degree point. Okay, that's going to be C. So it's actually the same height on both graphs, C here and C here, and that's going to be my C. So there is how I identify those points, and those are key points because those are going to be special value points. The amplitude of the graphs are of both the sine and cos graph. The amplitude is how high it goes from the middle. It's going to be 1 unit up and down, so we'd say that it's 1 unit. Okay, and the period, one full circle, is going to be 2 pi radians. And this again for the period of, it says here the cos graph, but it's the same for sine or cos.